The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Widow's Creek, Arizona Territory, 1878, as Victoria Kowalski clutched the letter that would forever change her fate. 3 years a widow with 4 daughters to feed and a dying farm, she had no choice but to accept her brother-in-law's invitation to join him in the mining town of Eureka, Nevada, a place that promised salvation but would soon deliver judgment. Victoria had been beautiful once, before hardship had etched permanent lines around her eyes and mouth. At 32, her chestnut hair was already streaked with silver, her hands calloused from working the land her husband had left her. 4 daughters: Abigail, 16, the twins Rose and Ruby, 12, and little Sarah, just 8, depended on her strength, a strength that was waning with each failed harvest. The stagecoach journey was brutal. For 5 days they rattled through desert and mountain passes, the girls huddled together on hard wooden benches. Victoria kept her spine straight, her gaze fixed on the dusty horizon, ignoring the pitying glances from fellow travelers. A woman alone with 4 daughters was an oddity, a curiosity, or worse, a burden. "Almost there, madam," the driver called as they crested a hill on the 6th day. Below them sprawled Eureka, a town carved into the Nevada mountains, its buildings clustered around the mines that had given it life. Smoke rose from smelters and the distant clang of metal on rock echoed up the hillside. "Is that our new home, Mama?" Sarah asked, her small face pressed against the window. Victoria swallowed hard. "Yes, darling, Uncle Joseph will be waiting." But Joseph Kowalski was not waiting when they arrived at the dusty stagecoach stop. Instead, a thin man in a wrinkled suit stood holding a sign with their name scrawled in charcoal. "Mrs. Kowalski?" he asked, eyeing the girls with a frown. "I'm Silas Garrett, Mr. Kowalski's associate. He's indisposed today. I'll escort you to your lodgings." Victoria felt a chill despite the afternoon heat. "My brother-in-law promised to meet us." Garrett avoided her eyes. "He's been quite busy with the mine. This way, please." They followed him through streets teeming with rough-looking men. Eureka was a boomtown, swollen with those seeking silver from the rich mines that pockmarked the mountains. Saloons and brothels outnumbered family homes 3 to 1, and Victoria pulled her daughters closer as they passed gambling halls where piano music clashed with drunken shouts. "Where are the other children?" Abigail whispered. Victoria had no answer. The few women they passed were either heavily painted and scantily dressed or worn-looking wives hurrying on errands, eyes downcast. Their lodgings turned out to be a small cabin on the outskirts of town, a single room with a lean-to kitchen and a roof that leaked in 3 places. Joseph had written of a proper house with room for them all. Mr. Kowalski thought this would suffice until you settled in, Garrett explained, dropping their single trunk on the dirt floor. "He'll call on you tomorrow. Good day, Mrs. Kowalski." That night, as her daughters slept on pallets around her, Victoria stared at the cabin's ceiling and fought back tears. Her husband Michael had been a dreamer, always seeing opportunity around every corner. His brother Joseph had seemed cut from different cloth, practical, successful. The letters promising a new start in Eureka had been Victoria's last hope. Morning brought no Joseph, but instead a knock from Martha Green, their nearest neighbor, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and a basket of bread. "Thought you might need this," she said, pressing the basket into Victoria's hands. "Word travels fast in Eureka." "Thank you," Victoria replied. "My brother-in-law, Joseph Kowalski." Martha's expression tightened. "He's not what his letters promised, is he?" Victoria felt her heart sink. "You know him. Everyone knows Joseph. He runs the smallest of the silver mines, but he's got big dreams and bigger debts." Martha lowered her voice. "He's been telling folks his brother's widow is coming with strong sons to work the mine." Victoria's blood ran cold. "I have daughters. I can see that." Martha's gaze softened as she watched the girls arranging their few belongings. Pretty girls, too pretty for a place like Eureka. Joseph finally appeared 3 days later, unrepentant and reeking of whiskey. He was a smaller version of Michael, with the same Kowalski blue eyes but none of the warmth. "You brought girls," he said without greeting, staring at Victoria's daughters as if they were defective merchandise. "You wrote you had children. I assumed they were boys." Victoria stood tall despite her exhaustion. "I wrote that I had 4 children. You assumed what you wished." Joseph spat on the ground. "What use are girls in a mining town? I needed workers, Victoria, strong backs. The mine's failing, and I promised my investors fresh labor." The betrayal stung worse than she'd imagined. "You brought us 2,000 miles to work your mine. What else are you good for?" Joseph sneered. "A barren widow who couldn't give my brother a son," Victoria slapped him, the sound cracking across the small cabin. Her daughters froze in their activities, wide-eyed at their mother's uncharacteristic violence. Joseph touched his reddening cheek, his expression darkening. "You'll regret that. This town has no place for a woman who can't produce sons. In Eureka, you're worthless." He left them with little food and less hope. The next day, Victoria walked to town, determined to find work. At the general store, the owner barely glanced at her before shaking his head. "No jobs for women here," he said. "Especially not widows with girls." She tried the hotel, the laundry, even the schoolhouse. Everywhere the answer was the same, sometimes spoken with pity, sometimes with contempt, but always final. By midday, Victoria sat on the steps of the church, fighting despair. A shadow fell across her, and she looked up to see a tall man with a weathered face partially hidden by a neat beard. He wore the practical clothes of a rancher rather than a miner, and his gray eyes held a quiet intensity. "Mrs. Kowalski?" he asked, removing his hat. "I'm Isaac Quinn. I have a ranch outside town. I understand you're looking for work." Victoria stood, straightening her worn dress. "Yes, Mr. Quinn, though it seems Eureka has little use for women who bear only daughters." Something flashed in his eyes, anger perhaps, though not directed at her. "Eureka has little understanding of true value, madam. I need a housekeeper. My previous one left to marry, and the place is showing it. The position includes lodging for you and your girls." It seemed too good to be true. "Why would you offer this to a stranger?" "Martha Green speaks highly of you," he said simply. "And I've found that folks who judge a woman by the gender of her children aren't worth listening to. The job's yours if you want it." 2 days later, Victoria and her daughters climbed into Isaac Quinn's wagon, their few possessions packed in the trunk that had carried them from Arizona. Joseph had raged when Victoria told him they were leaving, threatening to have the law on her for abandoning family obligations. "Your only obligation was to provide free labor," she'd replied coldly. "We never agreed to that." The Quinn Ranch lay 7 miles from Eureka, a modest spread nestled in a valley with mountains rising behind it. As they approached, Victoria saw a well-maintained house of timber and stone, a large barn and corrals holding horses of exceptional quality. "You raise horses?" she asked, noticing the animals' fine lines. Isaac nodded. "Breeding stock mostly, sell to the army and to stagecoach companies." He glanced at the girls, who were wide-eyed at the sight of the beautiful animals. "Do your daughters ride?" "No," Victoria admitted. "We never had horses in Arizona." A smile touched his lips. "They'll learn here if they've a mind to." The house was larger than it appeared from a distance, with a spacious kitchen, a comfortable parlor, 4 bedrooms upstairs, and an office that doubled as Isaac's bedroom. It was clean but spartanly furnished, clearly lacking a woman's touch. "It's not fancy," Isaac said as he showed them around. "But it's solid." Victoria's daughters explored with increasing excitement. After the cramped cabin in Eureka, the ranch house seemed palatial. "Where will we sleep, Mr. Quinn?" Abigail asked, ever practical. "You 4 will have the upstairs. I'll stay in my office." He addressed Victoria. "Your duties would be cooking, cleaning, mending. I have 2 ranch hands who stay in the bunkhouse, Ned and Charlie. Good men, both older. They take their midday meal here but breakfast and supper at their quarters." The arrangement was more than fair, the accommodations far better than Victoria had dared hope. Still, caution made her hesitate. "And what's expected of me beyond housekeeping, Mr. Quinn?" she asked when the girls were out of earshot. He stared at her for a long moment, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Nothing improper, Mrs. Kowalski. I'm offering employment, not asking for anything else. You have my word." Something in his steady gaze convinced her he spoke the truth. "Then we accept your offer with gratitude, Mr. Quinn." Life at the Quinn Ranch quickly settled into a rhythm that reminded Victoria of happier times. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, then sent the girls to their chores while she tackled the housework. Isaac was often gone by sunrise, working with his horses or riding the boundaries of his land, but he always returned for the noon meal, his quiet presence a reassuring constant. The girls thrived in the open spaces of the ranch. Abigail, serious and responsible, took to helping with the cooking and even began assisting Ned with the vegetable garden. The twins discovered a shared love for the horses, spending every free moment at the corral until Isaac finally offered to teach them to ride. "Are you sure?" Victoria asked, watching from the kitchen window as her middle daughters perched atop gentle mares, their faces alight with joy. Isaac adjusted Rose's grip on the reins. "I've never been more sure of anything. They have a natural seat." Only Sarah seemed to struggle, her shy nature making her reluctant to explore the vastness of the ranch. Victoria often found her sitting alone, clutching the rag doll that had been her father's last gift. "She needs time," Isaac observed one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the stars emerge. It had become their habit to share this quiet hour, a respite from the day's labor. "Moving is hard on the little ones. She lost her father when she was 5, Victoria said softly. "Sometimes I think she's afraid to love anything new in case it disappears too." Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Loss shapes us all differently." "You've known loss too." Victoria hadn't meant to pry, but something in his expression invited confidence. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "My wife died in childbirth 7 years ago, our son with her." Victoria's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry, Isaac." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and he looked at her with surprise that softened into something warmer. "It was a long time ago, but it's why I have little patience for men who value sons over daughters. Any healthy child is a blessing." The next day, Victoria found a small kitten in the barn, a tiny orange tabby abandoned by its mother. On impulse, she brought it to Sarah. "He needs someone to love him," Victoria explained, placing the mewling creature in her daughter's hands. "Someone gentle like you." Sarah's face transformed as the kitten nuzzled her palm. "Can I keep him, Mama, really, if Mr. Quinn agrees?" Isaac not only agreed but helped Sarah build a bed for the kitten from an old crate and soft rags. "What will you name him?" he asked as the little girl carefully placed her new pet in its bed. Sarah considered this with great seriousness. "Copper," she decided finally, "because he shines." Something shifted that day. Sarah began following Isaac around the ranch, Copper tucked in her apron pocket, asking endless questions that he answered with patient detail. By summer's end, she was helping him feed the chickens each morning, her shyness replaced by quiet confidence. One evening in late September, Victoria found Isaac in his office, poring over account books with a furrowed brow. "Is something wrong?" she asked, setting down the coffee she'd brought him. He rubbed his eyes. "Nothing unexpected. The ranch makes enough to keep going, but not much more. I was hoping to expand, maybe buy the Dawson place next year, but the numbers aren't adding up." Victoria hesitated, then said, "I could help if you'd like. My husband taught me bookkeeping." Surprise flickered across Isaac's face, followed by consideration. "I wouldn't want to impose on your time. You've given my daughters a home, Isaac. Let me contribute what I can." That night, they sat side by side at his desk, going through the ranch accounts. Victoria discovered Isaac was an excellent rancher but a haphazard record keeper. By midnight, she'd reorganized his books and found several places where he could reduce expenses. "You're remarkable, Victoria," he said as they finished, his voice rough with fatigue and something else she couldn't name. She felt a flush rise to her cheeks. It's simple mathematics. It's more than that. His hand moved as if to cover hers, then withdrew. You're bringing life back to this place. I didn't realize how empty it was until you and the girls came. The moment hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. Then the clock chimed, breaking the spell, and Victoria rose. "Good night, Isaac," she said softly, retreating to the stairs. "Good night, Victoria," he replied, his eyes following her until she disappeared from view. October brought the first frost and with it trouble. Joseph Kowalski rode up to the ranch one afternoon while Isaac was in town. Victoria was hanging laundry when she saw her brother-in-law's approaching figure and felt dread pool in her stomach. "So this is where you've been hiding," Joseph called, dismounting with drunken unsteadiness. "Playing house with the rancher while your husband's barely cold in his grave." Victoria stood her ground. "Michael has been dead for 3 years, Joseph, and what I do is no concern of yours." Joseph's face darkened. "It is when you took my brother's daughters away from family. I've come to take them back." "Back to what? A leaking cabin and mine work?" Victoria's fear gave way to anger. "They're my daughters, not yours." "The law says different." Joseph pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Judge Harmon signed this yesterday. As their closest male relative, I have custody until they're of age or married." Victoria snatched the paper, scanning its contents with growing horror. It was a custody order, signed and sealed by the territorial judge, granting Joseph guardianship of all 4 girls. "This is impossible," she whispered. "He can't do this without hearing my side." Joseph sneered. "He can when you're living in sin with a rancher. Everyone in Eureka knows what kind of housekeeper you really are." "That's a lie," Victoria's voice shook with rage. "Isaac Quinn is a decent man who offered us shelter when you abandoned us." "Save it for someone who cares," Joseph spat. "Get the girls ready, we're leaving today." Victoria backed toward the house. "You'll take them over my dead body." She turned to run, but Joseph grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully. "Don't test me, Victoria. I need those girls working or I lose everything. Let her go." Isaac's voice, cold and hard as steel, came from behind them. He'd returned from town unnoticed, and now stood with a rifle pointed steadily at Joseph's chest. Joseph released Victoria but didn't back down. "This isn't your business, Quinn. I've got the law on my side." He waved the custody order. Isaac didn't lower his weapon. "I know Judge Harmon well enough to know he'd never sign that without a hearing if he had all the facts. Now get off my property before I forget I'm a law-abiding man." Something in Isaac's eyes must have convinced Joseph of his seriousness, for he mounted his horse with a stream of curses. "This isn't over. I'll be back with the sheriff." After he galloped away, Victoria collapsed against the porch post, shaking. "He has a legal document, Isaac. What are we going to do?" Isaac's expression was grim as he examined the custody order. "We're going to fight. First thing tomorrow, we ride to Carson City to see Judge Harmon ourselves." That night, Victoria told her daughters a simplified version of what had happened. "Your Uncle Joseph thinks you should live with him," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "But Mr. Quinn and I are going to make sure that doesn't happen." "He can't take us," Abigail said fiercely. "We won't go." "No one's taking you anywhere," Isaac promised, his voice gentle but firm. "Your mother and I will leave at dawn for Carson City. Ned and Charlie will stay with you until we return." Victoria barely slept, her mind racing with fear. Before first light, she crept downstairs to find Isaac already awake, brewing coffee in the kitchen. "We should reach Carson City by nightfall if we push hard," he said, handing her a steaming cup. "I've sent word ahead to Judge Harmon. He'll see us first thing tomorrow." The journey was grueling but necessary. They rode side by side through mountain passes and across valleys, stopping only to rest the horses. By the time they reached the territorial capital, Victoria was saddle-sore and exhausted, but determined. Judge Harmon, a stern-faced man with shrewd eyes, listened carefully to their story the next morning. When Victoria described Joseph's neglect and his plans to put the girls to work in the mine, the judge's expression darkened. "I signed that order based on incomplete information," he admitted. Mr. Kowalski claimed his brother's widow had abandoned her daughters to live with a man of questionable character. "That's not true," Victoria said firmly. "Mr. Quinn offered us employment and shelter when my brother-in-law failed to provide what he promised." "There's nothing improper in our arrangement." The judge studied Isaac thoughtfully. "Is that so, Mr. Quinn? Just employment?" Isaac met his gaze unflinchingly. "Mrs. Kowalski is my housekeeper, Your Honor. She and her daughters have brought order and joy to my home, but our relationship is entirely proper." Something passed between the two men, an understanding that Victoria couldn't fully decipher. "Very well," Judge Harmon said finally. "I'm rescinding the custody order pending a full hearing." In the meantime, Mrs. Kowalski retains guardianship of her daughters. Relief washed over Victoria, but it was short-lived. "There's still the matter of appearances," the judge continued. "Eureka is a small town with big opinions. If you continue living under Mr. Quinn's roof unmarried, it will give Mr. Kowalski ammunition for his case." Victoria felt her cheeks burn. "What are you suggesting, Your Honor?" The judge's expression softened slightly. "I'm suggesting nothing, Mrs. Kowalski, merely pointing out realities. The hearing will be in 3 weeks. I suggest you consider your options carefully until then." They rode back to the ranch in thoughtful silence, both processing the judge's implied warning. It wasn't until they stopped to rest the horses at midday that Isaac finally spoke his mind. "He's right about appearances," he said, watching Victoria carefully. "Joseph will use our living arrangement against you at the hearing." Victoria nodded, her throat tight. "I know, perhaps we should find other accommodations in town. There's another solution." Isaac took a deep breath. "We could marry." Victoria stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What? A marriage of convenience," he clarified quickly. "To protect your custody of the girls. We already live together, we get along well enough, and the girls seem comfortable with me." "Well enough." Victoria echoed, an unexpected pain blooming in her chest. She'd thought foolishly, perhaps, that there might be more between them than mere convenience. Isaac must have read something in her expression, for he stepped closer. "That came out wrong. Victoria, he stopped, struggling for words. "I'm not good at this." "At what exactly?" she asked, her voice barely audible, "at telling a woman I've grown to care for her." His eyes, usually so confident, now held vulnerability. "That her daughters have become precious to me, that I wake each morning grateful you're all in my home." Victoria's heart raced. "Isaac, I'm not proposing out of convenience," he said softly. "I'm proposing because I've fallen in love with you, Victoria Kowalski. With your strength, your grace, your fierce love for your daughters, I'm proposing because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Tears welled in Victoria's eyes. "I never expected to love again after Michael died, but you saw value in me when everyone else saw only a failure, a woman who couldn't give her husband sons." Isaac took her hands in his. "Your daughters are a gift, Victoria. Their joy, their spirits, their growing strengths, I watch them and marvel at the woman who raised them. How could I not fall in love with you?" "Yes," Victoria whispered, closing the distance between them. "Yes, I'll marry you, Isaac Quinn." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, then deepening into something that made Victoria's knees weak. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "We should get back to the girls," Isaac said, his voice husky. "Tell them our news." The girls' reactions varied from Abigail's cautious approval to the twins' excitement to Sarah's quiet acceptance. It was Sarah who asked the question that mattered most. "Will you be our father now, Mr. Quinn?" She asked that evening as he tucked her into bed, Copper purring beside her. Isaac's expression softened. "If you'd like me to be, Sarah, but I'll never try to replace your real father in your heart." She considered this seriously. "I think Papa would want us to have a new father, especially one who likes Copper." Isaac laughed, stroking the kitten's head. "Then I'd be honored to be your father, Sarah Quinn." The town of Eureka received news of their engagement with mixed reactions. Some, like Martha Green, were genuinely pleased. Others whispered that Victoria had set her cap for the rancher from the start, using her daughters to snare him. Joseph Kowalski's reaction was predictably venomous. He cornered Victoria outside the general store a week before the wedding, his breath reeking of whiskey. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed. "Landing yourself a rich husband while I lose everything." Victoria stood her ground. "Isaac isn't rich, Joseph. He works hard for what he has, unlike some." "You've always thought yourself better than me," Joseph spat. "Just like Michael did, but I'm not finished yet. That custody hearing is still happening, and I've got witnesses who'll swear you were carrying on with Quinn long before this convenient engagement." "No one will believe your lies," Victoria said, but fear flickered in her stomach. Joseph smiled unpleasantly. "We'll see about that." "Enjoy your wedding, Victoria. It might be a short marriage." Despite Joseph's threats, Victoria and Isaac were married on a clear October morning in the small church on the edge of Eureka. Her daughters stood beside her, dressed in new frocks Isaac had insisted on buying. Abigail, nearly a woman herself, wept openly as Victoria and Isaac exchanged vows. The twins fidgeted but managed to remain relatively still throughout the ceremony, while Sarah stood solemn and straight, copper secretly tucked in a basket at her feet. That night, after the girls had gone to bed in their rooms now officially, their own Victoria stood nervously in the bedroom she would share with her new husband. She wore a new nightgown, simple but made of finer material than she'd worn in years. When Isaac entered, his eyes darkened at the sight of her. "You're beautiful," he said, crossing to where she stood. "But if you're not ready," Victoria silenced him with a kiss, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm ready," she whispered against his lips. "I'm your wife now." Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Victoria's head on Isaac's chest, he stroked her hair and murmured, "I never thought I'd find this again. Family, love." Victoria raised herself on an elbow to look into his face. "Neither did I, but here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, pulling her close. "And here we'll stay." The custody hearing 3 days later proved anticlimactic. Joseph arrived disheveled and unprepared, his witnesses failing to materialize. Judge Harmon, noting the Quinns' recent marriage and the obvious well-being of the girls, dismissed Joseph's petition and strongly suggested he leave the territory. "He means it," Isaac told Victoria as they rode home afterward. "Harmon doesn't make idle threats. Joseph won't trouble us again." Victoria wasn't entirely convinced, but as weeks passed with no sign of her brother-in-law, she began to relax into her new life as Mrs. Isaac Quinn. Winter transformed the ranch into a wonderland of snow and ice. The girls discovered sledding, shrieking with delight as they careened down the gentle slope behind the house on wooden sleds Isaac built for them. Even Abigail, usually so conscious of her approaching adulthood, abandoned dignity to race her sisters across the gleaming expanses. Christmas brought simple gifts exchanged with profound gratitude. Victoria had secretly sewed Isaac a new shirt, while he presented her with a delicate silver locket containing miniature photographs of each of her daughters. "How did you manage this?" she asked, amazed at the tiny portraits. "Had them taken when we went to town last month," he explained. "The photographer in Carson City did the rest. For the girls, there were books, hair ribbons, and a special surprise, a pony for Sarah, a gentle dappled creature with kind eyes." "You didn't have to do this," Victoria whispered as they watched Sarah cautiously approach the pony under Ned's watchful guidance. Isaac slipped an arm around her waist. "I wanted to. She's the only one who didn't take to riding. I thought a pony of her own might change that." He was right. By spring, Sarah and her pony, Daisy, were inseparable, and the last shadow of the little girl's shyness had vanished in the confidence of being a horsewoman like her sisters. Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves in the small herd of cattle Isaac maintained, foals in the breeding pastures, and unexpected news that left Victoria both terrified and elated. "A baby," Isaac repeated when she told him, his face a study in disbelief and joy. "We're having a baby." Victoria nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. The doctor says by late November. Isaac swept her into his arms, spinning her in a circle until she laughed breathlessly. "Put me down, I'll be sick." He set her gently on her feet but kept his arms around her. "Are you happy about this, Victoria? Truly?" She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the memory of his first wife's death in childbirth. "I am," she assured him. "A little frightened, perhaps. I'm not as young as I was." "You're still young," he said fiercely, "and strong. And this time, you'll have the best doctor in Nevada. I'll make sure of it." The girls received the news with varying reactions. Abigail, practical as always, immediately began planning how she would help with the baby. The twins peppered Victoria with questions about whether it would be a boy or girl, while Sarah simply hugged her mother tightly and whispered, "I'll share Daisy with the baby when it's big enough." As Victoria's body changed with the growing child, Isaac's protectiveness increased. He insisted on hiring additional help for the house, a young widow named Clara, who needed the work as much as Victoria needed the assistance. "You're spoiling me," Victoria protested, when Isaac brought home a rocking chair specially ordered from San Francisco. "I'm taking care of what's most precious to me," he corrected, placing a hand on her rounded belly. As if in response, the baby kicked against his palm and his face lit with wonder. "Hello there, little one, we're waiting for you." Summer heat gave way to autumn crispness, and Victoria's time drew near. The doctor from Carson City, arranged for by Isaac, arrived to stay in the guest room until the birth. Dr. Eleanor Webb was a surprise, a woman physician trained in Philadelphia who had come west for the same reason many did: opportunity and freedom. "Most men out here can't afford to be particular about a doctor's gender," she explained to Victoria during an examination. "Not when the nearest male physician might be 100 miles away." Victoria found Dr. Webb's presence reassuring. The woman's competent hands and matter-of-fact manner eased her growing anxiety as November approached. The baby arrived during the first snowfall of winter, a night of howling wind and stinging ice. Victoria's labor began shortly after supper, the girls sent to stay with Martha Green in town while Isaac paced the hallway outside their bedroom, flinching at each of Victoria's cries. "Mr. Quinn," Dr. Webb called shortly after midnight, "would you like to meet your son?" Isaac entered the bedroom on unsteady legs to find Victoria propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "A boy," he whispered, approaching the bed cautiously. Victoria smiled up at him, moving the blanket to reveal a tiny red face crowned with dark hair. "A son, strong and healthy." Isaac sat beside her, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he touched the baby's cheek with a gentle finger. "He's perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Victoria asked, already offering the swaddled infant with reverent care. Isaac took his son into his arms, studying his features with wonder. "Hello, Michael," he said softly. Victoria's eyes widened. "You want to name him after my first husband?" Isaac met her gaze steadily. "Michael Quinn. For the man who gave you your daughters, who are my greatest joy, and for our son, who is our new beginning, if that's agreeable to you." Fresh tears filled Victoria's eyes. "It's more than agreeable, it's perfect." The girls returned the next day, trooping into the bedroom with equal parts excitement and trepidation to meet their baby brother. Abigail, now 17 and increasingly beautiful, held him first, her expression softening as he wrapped his tiny hand around her finger. "He's so small," she marveled. "Was I ever this small, Mother?" "Smaller," Victoria assured her. "You were early." The twins took turns holding Michael, making identical faces of delight when he yawned enormously. Sarah approached last, Copper following at her heels as always. "Can he ride Daisy with me when he's bigger?" she asked as Isaac carefully placed the baby in her arms, supporting them both. "Of course," Isaac promised. "He'll be a horseman like his sisters." The family portrait was complete. Victoria in the bed, Isaac beside her, the four girls gathered around with baby Michael at the center of their circle. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white, while inside the Quinn ranch, warmth and love created a different kind of shelter. Spring came again, bringing with it baby Michael's first smiles and the unexpected return of Joseph Kowalski. He appeared at the ranch one April afternoon, his clothes finer than before, his manner subdued. "I've come to apologize," he said when Isaac met him at the door, rifle in hand, "and to say goodbye." Victoria joined her husband on the porch, Michael on her hip. "Goodbye." Joseph nodded, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm heading to California, struck it lucky in a silver claim near Virginia City, enough to start fresh." Isaac's stance remained wary. "What do you want from us, Kowalski?" "Nothing," Joseph said, surprising them both. "Just to say I was wrong. About everything, the girls, you, all of it." He looked at Victoria with something approaching genuine remorse. "Michael would be pleased, I think, to see you happy, to see his daughters thriving." Victoria studied her brother-in-law's face, searching for deception and finding none. "I hope you find what you're looking for in California, Joseph." He tipped his hat. "I hope I already have." With a last glance at the baby, the son who shared his brother's name, Joseph mounted his horse and rode away, out of their lives for good. That evening, as the family gathered for supper, Abigail made an announcement that had been brewing for weeks. "Mr. Peterson has asked me to teach at the school next term," she said, her cheeks flushed with pride. "He says I have a natural gift for it." Victoria exchanged a glance with Isaac. At nearly 18, Abigail was a woman now, beautiful and accomplished. Several young men in Eureka had already come calling, but she had shown no interest in marriage yet, her heart set on education. "If that's what you want, we'll support you," Isaac said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "Your mother and I are proud of you, Abigail." The twins, not to be outdone, revealed their own plans. "Ned's teaching us about cattle breeding," Ruby announced. "We want to start our own herd," Rose added. "Just a small one for practice." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking of expanding the cattle operation. Maybe you two could help with that." Victoria watched the exchange with a full heart. A year ago, the idea of her daughters having such opportunities would have seemed impossible. But Isaac had always seen their potential, valuing them not despite their gender, but because of the unique strengths each possessed. Sarah, now 9, had grown into a confident, quiet girl with a special way with animals. She spent her days roaming the ranch with Copper, who had grown into a magnificent tomcat, collecting injured birds and rabbits to nurse back to health. "I think Sarah might be a veterinarian someday," Isaac murmured to Victoria that night as they prepared for bed. "Dr. Webb says there's growing acceptance for women in medicine." Victoria smiled, watching Michael sleep in his cradle nearby. "And what about our son? What future do you see for him?" Isaac drew her into his arms. "The same as for our daughters, the future he chooses with our love behind him." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You've given us so much, Isaac, a home, a future, your name." "You've given me more," he countered, tipping her face up to his. "A family, love, purpose." He kissed her softly. "And you gave me daughters to cherish long before you gave me a son to carry my name." As summer bloomed across the Nevada landscape, the Quinn Ranch flourished alongside it. The house, once spare and functional, now overflowed with life and laughter. Victoria's gardens burst with vegetables and flowers, the corral held horses of increasing quality and value, and the pastures supported a growing herd of cattle. Isaac's investment in the Dawson property had come to fruition, doubling the ranch's size and securing the family's future. But the true measure of their success lay not in acres or animals, but in the thriving children who made the ranch their kingdom. Abigail began teaching at the Eureka School that fall. Riding to town each morning on a mare Isaac had bred especially for her, a beautiful bay with a gentle temperament but a spirited step, much like Abigail herself. The twins, now 13, divided their time between their studies and the small herd of cattle Isaac had helped them acquire. showing a natural aptitude for the business that impressed even Ned, who'd been ranching for 40 years. Sarah continued her quiet communion with all things wild, creating a makeshift infirmary in the corner of the barn where she tended injured creatures with surprising skill. Dr. Webb, impressed with the girl's natural talent, began sending medical texts for her to study. And Michael, sturdy and curious at nearly a year old, toddled after them all, adored by his sisters, doted on by his parents, a child born of love and raised in abundance. One evening, as summer faded into autumn again, Victoria sat on the porch watching her family move about the yard in the golden light of sunset. Isaac was teaching the twins a finer point of rope work, their heads bent together in concentration. Abigail sat nearby, reading a letter from a young man in Carson City who'd begun a careful courtship. Sarah knelt in the dust, showing Michael how to pet Copper with gentle hands, the cat tolerating the baby's clumsy affection with dignified patience. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Quinn," Isaac said, joining her on the porch steps after sending the twins to put away the ropes. Victoria smiled at her husband, the lines around his eyes deeper now but his gaze still clear and direct. "I was thinking about Eureka." "The town?" he asked, puzzled. "The name." "It means I have found it, usually referring to gold or silver." She looked out at her daughters, her son. "But we found something better here, didn't we?" Isaac followed her gaze, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Much better, we found home." As if sensing they were being discussed, the children looked up, their faces turning toward their parents with various expressions of love and belonging. Victoria reached for Isaac's hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of true partnership. "Home," she agreed, leaning against his shoulder as the sun set on another day in the life they had built together. A life richer than any silver strike, more precious than any fortune. In Eureka, Nevada, where once a town had called her worthless for bearing no sons, Victoria Quinn had proven that the true measure of wealth lay not in gender or convention, but in love freely given and joyfully received. And in the heart of the man who had seen the value in her daughters, long before he'd known the joy of his son.